Where do we go when we die? This question has followed humanity since the beginning of time. Every culture, every belief system, and every person faces this mystery. But the Bible gives us insight, not just mystical or symbolic, but clear, consistent truth about life after death. In this journey, we will explore what happens when we die, step by step, from the moment of death through the intermediate state, into the resurrection, judgment, and finally, eternity. Let's begin. When a person dies, their body returns to dust. This is what God said in Genesis 3:19, "For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." But what about the soul? Ecclesiastes 12:7 tells us that the spirit returns to God who gave it. So there is a separation. The body remains on earth, but the soul continues. At the point of death, there is immediate awareness. We see this in the story Jesus told in Luke 16 about the rich man and Lazarus. Both died, but immediately they were conscious. Lazarus was comforted. The rich man was in torment. There was no pause, no sleep, no waiting in the grave. The believer, when they die, enters into the presence of God. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 5:8, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord." This is not the final heaven, but a temporary place of peace, comfort, and fellowship with Christ. For the unbeliever, death leads to a place of torment, a spiritual waiting room of judgment. Luke 16 again illustrates this. The rich man was tormented, separated from God, conscious of his suffering and aware of the gulf between himself and Lazarus. So where do we go when we die? It depends entirely on our relationship with Christ. This intermediate state is not permanent. The Bible tells us that a day is coming when all the dead will rise. This is the resurrection. John 5:28-29 says, "The hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation." This is the moment when soul and body reunite. For the believer, this is a glorified, imperishable body, like the body Jesus had after his resurrection. 1 Corinthians 15 describes it beautifully. It is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. For the unbeliever, the resurrection is not to eternal joy, but to stand before God in judgment. Then comes the judgment. Hebrews 9:27 says, "It is appointed for men to die once, but after this, the judgment." Believers will stand before the judgment seat of Christ, not to be condemned, but to receive rewards. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. This is where our works, motives, and obedience are tested, and eternal rewards are given." Unbelievers will stand before the great white throne judgment. Revelation 20:12-15 gives us a sobering picture of this moment. Books are opened, records of every deed. Another book is opened, the book of life. Those not found in it are cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death, eternal separation from God. But for those whose names are in the book of life, eternity begins in the new heaven and new earth. Revelation 21 gives us a glorious picture. God will wipe away every tear. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. Behold, I make all things new. This is not floating in clouds or playing harps. This is real, physical, renewed creation. A world where righteousness dwells, where we see God face to face. So where do we go when we die? We step into eternity. Our destination depends on one thing: what we did with Jesus Christ. He said in John 14:6, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The greatest decision you will ever make is not about money, fame, or comfort. It's about your soul. Because when you die, there is no turning back, no second chances, only eternity. That's why now, today, is the day of salvation. Call upon the name of the Lord, surrender your life, live with eternity in mind. Because when this life ends, the next one begins, forever. Long before modern theology, ancient civilizations also wrestled with the question of what happens after death. Egyptian texts like the Book of the Dead speak of the soul passing through judgment halls where one's heart is weighed. The heart had to be lighter than a feather to gain access to the field of reeds, their version of paradise. In ancient Greek belief, Hades was the realm of the dead. Souls would cross the river Styx, ferried by Charon, and be judged. The virtuous were sent to Elysium, the wicked to Tartarus. These ideas weren't just myth. They reflect a deep human need to understand justice beyond the grave. Even ancient Mesopotamian tablets, some of the oldest writings we possess, tell of a shadowy underworld called Irkala. Everyone went there, noble or evil. But there was a lingering fear. What if you were forgotten? Without remembrance, the soul faded. These ancient stories all point to something powerful, a collective sense that this life is not the end. The Bible, unlike those stories, doesn't leave us in the shadows. It pierces through them with light. The prophets spoke of resurrection, not just survival of the soul, but a full restoration. Daniel 12:2 says, "Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt." Job, even in his suffering, declared in Job 19:26, "After my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God." Jesus confirmed it all. He told Martha in John 11, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live." And when Jesus himself rose from the dead, it changed everything. Death lost its finality. The tomb became a doorway. Early Christians lived with this hope. They faced martyrdom with courage because they knew to die was gain. The catacombs of Rome, where persecuted believers were buried, are filled with inscriptions like "In peace" and "Awaiting resurrection." Now, many ask, what is heaven like? It is a place of glory. Paul was caught up to the third heaven and said it was inexpressible. Revelation describes streets of gold, gates of pearl, and the throne of God shining with brilliance. But above all, it is where God dwells, and in his presence is fullness of joy. Some also ask, do we recognize one another? Yes. On the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appeared, and they were recognized. In heaven, our identities are not erased. They are perfected. And what about those who never heard the gospel? Romans 1 tells us that creation reveals God's nature and conscience bears witness. God is just and he judges rightly. But the mission remains urgent, because Jesus is the only name given under heaven by which we must be saved. Then we come to the end of all things. 2 Peter 3 says the heavens will pass away with a roar. Revelation 20-22 describes the final judgment and the unveiling of the New Jerusalem. Eternity is not an endless blank space. It's a restored relationship, a renewed creation, and the perfect fulfillment of God's promise. This world is fading, but something greater awaits. And you are eternal. The question is not if you will exist after death. The question is where and with whom. Jesus offers life, he offers hope, he offers himself. Take hold of it before it's too late. Because eternity is not just coming, it's already written, and your story matters in it. Choose wisely, live ready, forever begins now.